As of uploading this video, the 2018 US Midterm Elections are less than 2 months away, and many American voters, along with the pundits and politicians on both sides, are talking about a Democratic blue wave which will sweep the ruling Republicans out of the House and possibly even the Senate, as if it's a done deal, that it is written in stone and a foregone conclusion. But is it? Is it not possible that this unstoppable and unavoidable massive blue wave of change may in fact turn out to be no more than ripples upon a pond? Tiny, ineffective, powerless, and in the end, changing nothing? I would have to say that this is not only entirely possible, but that it is entirely likely, as I have personally witnessed it happen here in BC 2 election cycles ago. Now, let me tell you of the sad cautionary tale that was the 2013 BC Provincial general election, where the much desired and anticipated wave of change that the voters of BC were hoping for, expecting, and demanding ended up fizzling out and turning into nothing but disappointing ripples upon a pond. The year was 2013, and the voters of BC were in an ugly, restless mood. The governing far-right party, known as the BC Liberals, or rather, Liberals in name only, had been in power for the past 12 years, and the electorate was demanding a change. The party was in dire straits, to say the least. At best, they were unpopular, at worst, hated, even by many of those on the right. In the 12 years since gaining power, the Liberal government was embroiled in a number of major scandals, the least of which was when then Premier Campbell got arrested for and convicted of DUI in the state of Hawaii while on vacation in 2003. And even though he had twice the legal limit of alcohol in his system and pleaded no contest to the charges, he refused to step down from the premiership, as both tradition and honor demanded, basically claiming that because DUI was at the time in Hawaii only a misdemeanor and not a felony, he did not have to step down. But by far the biggest scandal to plague the party was the ongoing BC Rail sales scandal. During the run-up to the 2001 general election, Campbell and his Liberals promised that, contrary to rumors, they had no plans to sell off the assets of BC Rail, which at the time was a very profitable Crown corporation. Had they not made that promise, the odds are they would not have won many of the ridings in the interior of the province, which were dependent on BC Rail to move their products, namely lumber, down to the coast for export overseas. In 2003, they broke that promise and broke up the assets of BC Rail, selling them off to CN Rail and Omnitrax. However, not long after the sale, rumors began that the bidding process had been rigged in favor of both CN Rail and Omnitrax, and that information from competing bids had been leaked by government insiders to both companies. This led to the unprecedented event of having the police raiding the legislature in 2004. As it turned out, the $1.05 billion selling price was actually no more than $500 million after you factored in the tax breaks and kickbacks the Campbell government gave to both CN Rail and Omnitrax. Also, when they came into power, they also went on an immediate austerity drive, cutting many of the services BCers had come to rely upon, and laid off many frontline service providers, many from within the health care and public education system. But by far the most questionable thing they did was to tear up various negotiated collective agreements between the province and the government employees union, representing various healthcare workers, and arbitrarily imposing wage cuts upon nurses and other healthcare workers. This led to many within the business community to wonder just what the word of this government was actually worth. They were willing to tear up labor contracts and use their legislative power to do so. What other contracts would they arbitrarily tear up? They also used their legislative power to declare teachers an essential service, thus removing their right to strike. Future Premier Christy Clark played a major role in both these actions. The second major scandal was when the government attempted to harmonize provincial sales tax with the federal goods and service tax to one unified tax called the harmonized sales tax. This move proved to be very unpopular and angered a large portion of the population, especially when it was revealed that it would lead to tax increases into some sectors of the economy. Even though the HST was implemented in 2009, a referendum on the matter killed it and it was revoked in 2013. The HST controversy was the final nail in Gordon Campbell's political coffin, with his personal popularity rate hovering around the 9% mark and the Liberal Party not much better off. He stepped down in 2011 and Christy Clark took over. After she took over, she wanted to call a snap election in order to secure her own mandate. However, she was quickly dissuaded from the idea by the party executive, who, reading the polls, knew that she and the party would be wiped off the political map if a general election were to be held, much like the NDP were back in 2001. So she opted to wait until the mandatory 2013 election. However, by 2013, she had become embroiled in a number of high-profile scandals of her own. First, there were many accusations of nepotism, where favorable and profitable government contracts and concessions had been awarded to her brother and ex-husband. Then there was the run-of-the-river scandal, where BC Hydro was forced to purchase electrical power generated by independent power producers, operating small generating plants along various BC rivers for a premium price. At the time, BC Hydro had no requirement for this excess capacity and was forced to sell it off at a loss. Premier Clark was seen to be too closely tied to these private hydroelectric producers, leading many to speculate that she, or those she was closely associated with, were profiting from the scam. This, along with her direct involvement with her predecessor's Gordon Campbell scandals, had made her arguably the most hated politician in Canada, earning her the nicknames of Krusty Clark or Crispy Clark, given her chances in the upcoming election. And that dislike was not only coming from the left but also from the right. Former Social Credit Cabinet Minister and right-wing blogger Rafe Mayer was pushing hard for her removal and overthrow from the party and premiership. By the time the 2000 general election rolled around, both Christy Clark and her Liberals were tanking in the polls. And to add insult to injury, they had recently lost 4 by-elections or special elections in what should have been very safe seats deep within the Conservative Bible Belt of BC. 3 of those seats were lost to independent candidates and 1 to the left-leaning NDP. The situation was so bleak that even the local press, which was very pro-right-wing, were predicting that it was not a matter of Clark and her Liberals losing the election, but rather by how much. Many were expecting a total wipeout. So, we had a highly vilified and despised leader, a corrupt party whose membership appeared only to be interested in lining their own pockets and holding onto power at any cost, an angry electorate demanding change, and the polls and pundits predicting a massive sweep to the left in the upcoming election. It sounds all too familiar, doesn't it? On my birthday, May 14th, 2013, BC went to the polls and voted. By the end of the evening, as the votes were counted and the results announced, the unbelievable had happened. Not only did the Liberals win the election, but they actually increased their majority within the legislature. The only bright point of the night was that Christy Clark lost her seat in the affluent, highly conservative, and moneyed riding of Point Grey, Vancouver, to a socialist NDP candidate. This forced her to cut a deal with the elected MLA in a safe riding, who would step down and vacate his seat, thus allowing her to run for it in a by-election. So what happened? How could all the polls and pundits been so wrong? Well, there were a number of factors that came into play on election day, and it is those factors which you Americans who are expected to see a blue wave of change need to be aware of. First off, there was vote splitting. Apart from the 2 main parties, the Liberals and the NDP, there were 2 spoiler parties running. The first was the left-of-center, environmentally focused Green Party of BC, which traditionally siphoned votes away from the more essentialist NDP. And then there was the new far-right party, the Conservative Party of BC, which was expected to drain votes away from the right-of-center Liberals. Both the Liberals and the NDP were well aware of the threat that the Greens posed to the NDP vote count. This forced the NDP to split their election campaign focus onto 2 fronts. They had to not only battle the governing Liberals, but also had to fend off the Greens in a number of key ridings. The Liberals, knowing that the Greens had the potential to damage the NDP, and at best could only win maybe 1 or 2 ridings, began overtly and covertly supporting Green candidates in key ridings, where they felt the Greens could drain off enough votes from the NDP to allow them, the Liberals, to come up through the middle and win the riding. It was reported that a number of Green candidates received campaign funding from secret donors from within the Liberal Party, and those donations actually came from the Liberals' well-stuffed campaign war chest. It should be noted that these allegations have never been investigated nor proven. The Liberals, on the other hand, were able to ignore the Conservative Party threat, having correctly judged it to be too small to worry about, and in this assumption they were correct. The Conservative Party could not gain the support of the business communities of BC, due in no small part because their leader had all the warmth and charisma of a monitor lizard. This allowed the Libs to concentrate their entire campaign against the NDP. The Liberals' strategy worked. On election night, the Greens were not only able to capture 1 riding from the NDP, but drained enough votes from the NDP from an estimated 12 to 20 key ridings, allowing the Liberals to come up through the middle and take them. The majority of the votes the Greens received in those ridings would more than likely have gone to the NDP, and had they done so, it would have changed the outcome of the election dramatically. Instead of the Liberals getting a stronger majority, we more than likely would have had a majority NDP government. But why bring this up, you ask? After all, the US is basically a 2-party system, so vote splitting should not be an issue. Normally I would agree with that, except for what could be called the Bernie Sanders effect. After Bernie Sanders lost a primary race to Hillary Clinton, many of his supporters refused to back her, either by not voting at all, or putting his name down on write-in ballots, or worse yet, these protest votes no doubt contributed to the Democrats losing a number of key swing states and other close races. Also, many unaffiliated U.S. voters see little or no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans, and may either spoil their ballots or cast their votes for an unviable fringe party candidate or independent. While this is well within their rights, these protest votes may as well be votes for the winning candidate in a close race. And if it is your goal or desire to oust a sitting Republican senator or congressman, then your best odds of fulfilling your wish would be voting for their Democrat opponent and not casting your vote for either a fringe or independent candidate. For to do so would be akin to casting your vote for the Republican candidate. And the Republican Party is well aware of these facts and apparently is working to try to maximize their chances by quietly, and not so quietly, promoting third-party candidates such as Greens and Independents. Already, a number of Green Party candidates in the upcoming November midterms have been exposed to have been GOP operatives. The GOP, it seems, has taken a page out of the BC Libs election playbook and are attempting to split the vote. And this is something many of you who are considering voting for the Greens or any other third-party candidate should be aware of. You could actually be casting your vote for that which you are trying to get rid of. Another major factor in the BC Liberals' unexpected win was voter complacency. During the run-up to the election, the press was full of stories, op-eds, and polls, all claiming that the Christy Clark Liberals were heading to a major defeat and would be lucky to even survive as a party. This caused many of those who would have voted against the Liberals to stay home instead of voting, assuming that it was a done deal and that they did not have to make the effort to go to their polling station and cast their ballot. And many NDP candidates also fell into this trap, believing that it was all preordained and thus did not push to get the vote out. The same could not be said about the BC Liberals. They were very motivated and driven to get as many of those that would support them out to vote. And they were not loath to play the religious cards, be they evangelical or even Orthodox Sikhs. And they were very successful, as the results of the election would ultimately show. And this arguably is the biggest threat that the Blue Wave is facing: voter complacency. The idea that the November 8th results are a done deal, and that you do not have to make the effort to A. register to vote, B. make sure you know exactly what you need to vote, C. knowing where your polling station is located, and D. actually making the effort to get out on election day and casting your vote, no matter how long the lineups are. It doesn't help that voter turnout for even major elections are generally low. In the 2016 election, the turnout was around 55.4%. down from 60% in 2012 and 63.7% in 2008. But traditionally, the voter turnout for US midterm elections is even worse, normally hovering around 40%, and it dipped to an almost historic low of 35% in the 2014 midterms. And the numbers get even worse when you look at the age demographics for those who are actually turning up to vote. As you can see by the graph, those between the ages of 18 and 29 have rather poor voter turnout percentages, as opposed to those in the older age groups, especially when it comes to midterm elections. More often than not, the 18 to 24-year-old demographic turnout is below 20%. And this is a major problem, as many of those who are looking for a change are counting on young voters coming out in strength to help them offset the advantages the GOP has due to their dominance with the older age demographics, who are generally conservative and vote the GOP line. Young people have often demonstrated a passion for a cause and can be very active in demanding changes. They will protest, they will march, they will conduct multimedia and social media campaigns and boycotts, as amply demonstrated by the activity and actions by students and young people in the aftermath of the Stoneman Douglas High School shootings. However, all these protests, marches, and social media actions by the young will be all for nothing and ultimately meaningless if they do not get out and vote. And voting is arguably the most powerful and meaningful tool of change the young have at their disposal. If they fail to mobilize and vote en masse, then they will have surrendered to people in my age group who will once again dictate what will be on the U.S. national agenda for the next few years, and will select who will be making the decisions that will affect the lives and future of the young for a very long time to come. And you can believe that those who currently support the status quo are motivated, organized, and mobilizing against any change in the system. They have the power of money and the support of many of the pulpits at their command in order to get their message out. They are a powerful, large, and credible threat to your desired blue wave of change, and they will be getting as much of their vote out as possible, as they fear for the loss of their power and their ability to steer your national agenda and force their will upon you and your nation. You cannot be complacent and just assume that your desired results are a done deal. You must make the effort to actually go out and register to vote. Confirm that you are indeed registered to vote, have all the required documentation on hand you require to vote, and to know exactly where your polling station is and what the polling hours are. Then you have to go out in time to vote while the polls are open, and to take into consideration that there's likely going to be long lineups, and it could take a few hours to exercise your most important right and duty as a citizen. And I am saying this especially to the young who may be listening. I know that voting can be tedious, boring, and unexciting, especially when compared to, say, protesting or marching or even engaging in social media campaigns. However, if you truly wish to effect a change and make your voice heard, you and your friends must go out on election day and cast your ballot. It is the most powerful tool you have at your disposal. Do not waste it. Because if you don't vote on November 6th, you may wake up on November 7th and find nothing has changed. Another big factor that led to the stunning BC Liberal victory was voter fatigue. After 12 years of endless BC Liberal scandals and partisan politics, the voters were sick and tired of politics as a whole. Normally, Canadian election periods are a lot shorter than their US counterparts, lasting weeks only instead of months or years as in the US. However, as soon as Christy Clark assumed the premiership of BC, she had been on a constant election campaign, even though the election writ would not have been dropped for another 2 years. Pretty much any good news announcement to the media came out as an announcement from the Liberal Party of BC, complete with their logo, and not from the government of BC as tradition demanded. Of course, the reverse was also true. Any announcements which could be perceived to be as negative or bad were released under the banner of the government of British Columbia, which included the opposition party sitting in the legislature, and often Clark or her people would try to pass the blame for such announcements as unfortunate and needed remedies for past NDP actions a decade earlier. In the meantime, the other parties, such as the NDP, Conservatives, and the Greens, were forbidden to actively campaign until the election writ was dropped. By the time the writ had been dropped and the general election of 2013 was announced, the people of BC were utterly sick and tired of politics, and many just did not give a damn anymore. And this was reflected by the low voter turnout on polling day. And we are seeing this today in the US. Barely a day does not go by without some new scandal rising out of the fetid cesspits that are the Trump White House or the GOP-dominated Senate and House. And Trump has never ceased campaigning. It has been non-stop election rallies for him and his supporters, and those rallies dominate the various media channels and outlets. This has no doubt led to a lot of voter fatigue among US voters. People who are sick and tired of the non-stop political news and just want it all to go away and not bother them anymore. Unfortunately, this generally leads to low voter turnout at the best of times. During your midterm elections, the voter turnout can be even worse. And I do not doubt that many on the right and those that wish to maintain the status quo are hoping this will be the result of the midterm elections in November, as they are worried that those who normally would not vote in the midterms might just come out and vote against them. Again, to make the changes that you are seeking, you must be aware of voter fatigue, not only with yourself, but also with those you know. You and those like you will need to get past it and make the effort to vote on November 6th, no matter how sick and tired you and your associates are of the whole political process. So, what can you learn from the BC Provincial election of 2013? 1. Be aware of vote splitting. If you are thinking about voting for a third party or independent candidate, do your research first. Ask yourself these questions. Just exactly where do they stand on the issues you care about? What does their past affiliations and history tell you about them? Are you 100% sure that they are not a stealth Republican? Do they even have a remote chance of winning? And more importantly, will a vote for them take away a vote from the Democratic candidate? Given the importance and what is at stake for the November midterms, along with just how close many of the races actually are, you may want to forego casting your vote on non-viable or questionable third-party or independent candidates, even in protest. With this election, taking the higher moral ground may just be voting for the lesser of two evils. 2. Beware of complacency. As you get closer to election day, you will be bombarded endlessly with polls, pundits, and talking heads, all no doubt going on great lengths about how the blue wave is a done deal and a foregone conclusion. Do not believe them. Do not assume that it is a done deal and a foregone conclusion, and that your vote is not needed nor important, because in reality, it is both. Given how close many of the races are, especially for your Senate, every vote will be important and will count. You'll need to actually get up and make the effort, not only to vote, but to ensure that you are actually able to cast your ballot. And you need to get as many of your like-minded friends and family to do so as well. Again, you and they must 1. Check to make sure that you are registered to vote, and if not, register immediately. Do not assume that you already are. 2. Make sure you know exactly where your polling station is located and what are its opening and closing times. 3. Ensure that you have all the proper forms of identification that you are going to need in order to cast your vote. 4. Anticipate that there will be long lineups at your polling stations, so go there as early as possible. Dress comfortably, take water and snacks just in case, and see if you can go in as a group. Make a day of it. 5, and most importantly, actually vote. It is arguably the most important tool you have to effect change, and is the most important right and duty you have as a citizen. Use it or lose it. And finally, 3. Do not fall into the trap of voter fatigue. I know the constant barrage of 24-hour political scandals, crises, and not to mention campaigning is very tiring and wearying, and that many of your fellow citizens have had enough and just don't want to be bothered with it anymore. But that is what those who are currently in power are hoping for, that you and those like you will be so fed up with the whole thing that you will stay home on election day and let others decide your fate for you. This election may be one of the most important ones held in the history of your nation. Do not allow your fatigue from the whole political process make you sit it out on the sidelines, no matter which side of the divide you're on. You must get out and vote. In conclusion, the very fate and direction your nation is going to take over the next decade or so will be decided on November 6, 2018. This could well be your one and only chance to change the direction you are currently on, and perhaps bring back a measure of sanity and maturity to your political process and national discourse. Or you could just continue on the road you are currently on, a road which I fear will have your nation one day in the not too distant future going the same way as the former Yugoslavia, only this time it will be orders of magnitude worse. That is all for now. Please rate, subscribe, and share, especially share. Also, the comment section of this video is wide open and unmoderated. Please feel free to leave a comment or two. Till next time, take care one and all, and good luck. I think you're gonna need it.